Canon Films, the home of high-powered, high-voltage motion picture entertainment. With the screen's biggest spectacles, brightest stars, and boldest lineup of explosive entertainment. We're taking motion picture excitement over the edge and your box office over the top. We're Canon Films, and we're dynamite.
And finally, I believe this is the first film that Golan and Globus produced that we've been able to watch. Unless I'm mistaken?
No, it's definitely the first film that we've been able to watch that they produced. They did some Israeli films very early on in the canon story, as it were, but this is definitely the first one that comes up, a Golan and Globus production that we have seen. And I think that's crazy exciting.
And that movie is called God's Gun.
Yes, and should we just fire straight into it? Did you enjoy this movie, Justin?
I did enjoy God's Gun.
A crazy plot twist-filled kind of pile of nonsense. It's very Golan and Globus-y, actually, I think.
So you think it's, their first outing in this kind of, I don't know what it is, thematic territory, or became their signature?
Well, I mean, it's kind of their signature thing, because when we think about Golan and Globus, we think of them kind of doing ideas that, even by the point when they did them, were slightly out of date. So, like in this case, we can have a spaghetti western from like 1976, right?
Yep.
And we have them doing films that kind of don't really make a lot of sense, but they just keep driving along excitingly. I know this is not the most exciting spaghetti western. Stuff keeps happening in it, and we've watched a lot of movies by this point where we cannot say that to be true.
And I should note that, as far as spaghetti westerns go, by the time this one was made, spaghetti westerns were dead. Like, they were dead in the water, people didn't really make them anymore. It went through the period of With a Fistful of Dollars and movies like Django. That's what started the spaghetti western boom in the late 60s. But then, like most trends in Italy, they just run it right into the ground. And what happens when something gets really popular is you start getting parodies of that thing. And in this case, with spaghetti westerns, it was the Trinity films, like My Name is Trinity and stuff like that. So onward it went, and the westerns got goofier and goofier and goofier until they just stopped making them.
Well, it's interesting because I consider Lee Van Cleef's appearance in this movie to be one of the main emotional roller coasters that I went through while watching this.
What?
Simply because, we're going to talk through the plot, but I will sort of take you, as we go through the plot, I will take you through beat by beat what I was thinking about Lee Van Cleef as we watched it.
You mean that you feel that he's on, like, the doorstep of death, or?
No, it's simply that, I'm going to make it clear, is that Lee Van Cleef appears in this film, and early on his character dies, and I was like, because I immediately saw him and was like excited, because I actually love Lee Van Cleef.
He's like one of the baddest badasses of cinema.
Yeah, he's one of the, he's super cool in everything you see him in, even though he doesn't, when you look at me, he just looks like an old dude, right? But he has such an amazing kind of swagger and style. Like and for a few dollars more, he's that's one of cinema's most amazing badasses, basically. And in this movie, he appears, and I was like, oh, brilliant, Lee Van Cleef's in this. Then he dies, and I was like, oh no, Lee Van Cleef isn't really in this. Then he appears again, and I was like, hooray, Lee Van Cleef is
All right,
in
you're getting
this.
into too many spoilers. Let's just jump into the plot, because, go the way that we usually do.
Yeah, let's go the way that we usually do. So, our film opens with kind of a puppet show sort of framing. If we see this puppet show, and these guys appear later on. I don't really get thematically what these puppet show guys have to do with anything, but it feels like it's supposed to mean something. I don't know.
Oh, really? Like what? We could practice singing songs, or put on a play, or a puppet show. I could bury you alive. I could pound your face.
Bad guys roll into town, right? There's a shootout, they hit a woman, they punch a woman in the face immediately, just so you know you're watching a canon film. And one of the main bad guys is Jack Palance. Right?
Yep, that's right, Jack Palance, who, for people who don't know, had a Hollywood career in about, I guess, late 50s, early 60s, and like a lot of the stars that age out of it, he went to Italy and started what seemingly is hundreds of spaghetti westerns.
Yeah, so when Jack Palance appeared, for me that was not a moment of excitement. That was, oh, Jack Palance will be in any old shit. So this is no guarantee of quality yet. But then we basically cut to the church where the priest, or I don't know what denomination he is, so I'm not necessarily sure he's a priest, but just the holy man of the local area, is played by Lee Van Cleef. So I was like, yay, Lee Van Cleef is here, right?
Wearing an insane wig.
Huh, nice wig. That's the best human hair wig money can buy.
Yes, that is true.
Like, whoever decided, it's basically like if you went to a high school and picked up the, curly wig, that's the wig that Lee Van Cleef is wearing.
Yeah, and Lee Van Cleef he's palling about with a wee boy called Johnny. Now, Johnny is...
played by an actor whose name I recognize, but I didn't know him from anything, Leif Garrett. He was a pop star, wasn't he?
I believe he was a pop star, and he was kind of one of those mid-70s sort of teen beat idols, and the girls fancied him. He sort of grew up in Hollywood, I think, and that's kind of how he sort of fell into the whole thing. I don't really know him from anything, but I feel for a certain, American middle-aged woman, he is...
the sex symbol.
Yeah, the sex symbol that they remembered when they were just, young teens.
And he's decent in this movie for a child actor.
There is some amazing acting he has to do for no clear reason because of one of the twists in the movie that doesn't come to anything, which we will get to. So the idea is that Johnny is hanging about with Lee Van Cleef. Even though Lee Van Cleef is playing a priest, there's no sexual impropriety implied.
I never even thought of that watching it.
But and basically Johnny's like, oh, you're going to teach me how to shoot this gun that for some reason you have behind the altar. And he's like, oh, I don't remember how to shoot a gun, and that's not really my gun anyway. That's my brother's. He lives in Mexico.
So I heard this line, and I was thinking, oh, is Jack Palance Lee Van Cleef's brother or something like that? There's going to be a brother-brother duel. And man, there's nothing I love more than a peaceful man who has to take up arms and take revenge for something. And I was very excited.
Yeah, I got very excited by the idea that Lee Van Cleef, well, maybe not Jack Palance was his brother, just maybe the idea that Lee Van Cleef was lying, that was his gun, and he was going to start kicking some holy ass. Mm-hmm. It doesn't actually go that way.
No, it doesn't.
You think you could teach me how to shoot a gun sometime?
Johnny, I don't think I remember very well.
Then why do you keep that gun in the drawer?
It's not mine. I'm holding it for somebody. It's time you stopped. Stopped and do what? Hang up my gun, I'm dead in an hour. Leave. Leave. What do you mean? Leave and go where? Where you can start a new life.
I hope you learned your lesson. Never help anyone.
So, Jack Palance and his gang of, ruffians, and they roll into town after the other town that they ransacked, and they go to the bar, whorehouse area, and they just start creating some shit, right? They just kind of murder a guy for, I don't remember why.
Because it's cool to throw a knife in a guy's back. I assume that's the only reason.
Yeah, and then they're like, oh, self-defense, but the lady who runs the whorehouse bar is like, get the sheriff, and of course, the sheriff is like classic spaghetti west type sheriff, where he's just like a shitty drunk who doesn't really give a fuck.
How do these people always get elected as sheriff? Because they're always terrible.
I mean, I think the idea is that these frontier towns, I mean, at least the joke is supposed to be, right, that the frontiers is so dangerous being a sheriff, no one wants to do it, apart from old alcoholics who are waiting to die.
Yeah.
Do you know the Claytons?
Listen, Sheriff,
Jenny, take it easy. I'm glad those people are gone. I don't want any more trouble in this town. And going after them would just mean risking the lives of all these people.
But they must be punished. Sheriff, why don't you go after them? Are you going to let them get away with this? You can't let them get away.
Jenny, those men are gone.
More like good cop, drunk cop.
More like good cop, bad breath.
I should jump in now and point out that this film doesn't look like most spaghetti westerns. And that's mostly because it was directed by a dude named Gianfranco Parolini. And he has like a weird energy to the way that he moves his camera. Like he does a lot of whip pans and handheld, which is usually not seen in spaghetti western films, where it's mostly, Sergio Leone, it's locked down. He actually started the Sartana series and the Sabata series of spaghetti western.
It's interesting as well because the guy who plays the sheriff, I saw a quote from him online where he said that he was he left the production actually because he didn't and he had to be dubbed by someone else because he was like the person playing the sheriff was in a bunch of other westerns in the previous to that, and he says that he was starring in he's told someone he was in the worst movie ever because the producer was Israeli, the director was Italian, they couldn't speak to each other, and he said, and it doesn't matter because the director's deaf anyway.
Wait, what? I didn't read that anecdote.
Yep, it's an interesting anecdote.
Just like Robert Cluse was supposedly deaf, the guy who directed Enter the Dragon.
Well, there we go. And I think that's pretty unfair to this movie. It is not the worst movie ever.
No.
It's definitely not the worst one we've seen.
Even as far as spaghetti westerns go, like, it's not that bad. It's got a little energy. Its biggest issue is that beyond its insane, pointless twists, there's not really anything that memorable about it.
No, that is the main issue. Mm-hmm. So they go and get the sheriff. He's like, yeah, whatever.
Claytons are a very rough bunch, and I don't want any more of them in this town.
Tell us something we don't know.
And they roll out of town. And the interesting thing about the lady who runs the whorehouse / bar is that she's played by Sybil Danning, who's in loads of Cannon films from the Golan and Globus era.
Mm-hmm. But we haven't seen her yet. So this is like the prologue to the Sybil Danning era.
It is, but it's obviously it's important because this is a Golan and Globus production, so clearly they met on this film, and Golan and Globus were like, I like the look of her, and used her loads of times from now on. Not that I can think of any of the films she's been in off the top of my head, but she is in a lot of them.
I remember her not having really seen her in anything, but she used to host these VHS action movies. It was like Sybil Danning's like action collection or something like that. And she'd show up in these skimpy tops and have a machine gun and be like, today we're watching a film from the Philippines or something like that.
That sounds amazing.
I don't know, that sounds kind of sad. Yeah.
It does. So, the one thing that I don't think I mentioned at this point is that she's also Johnny's mother.
Yes,
right?
that's right. She's Johnny being the young kid.
Which will become important. And she's really, really annoyed with these baddies. And she's complaining to the town. And the only person who really listen is our priest, Lee Van Cleef.
Yeah.
Right? And the sheriff is like, don't go after them. You're just going to create trouble for the town. And he's like, look, I'm going to go after them. So he goes, well, if you're going to have to go after them, at least take this gun. And it's one of the sort of the main sort of things about this movie is Lee Van Cleef is like, I don't need this gun.
Is there a reason? They talk about it later on in the movie, right? Why he doesn't use guns?
Not really. He just doesn't like guns.
I hate that. That's right up there with someone being like, "Oh, my parents told me not to fight."
Well, yeah, one of the things is that he's like really religious, right? And when he, I mean, spoilers, I guess, talks to his brother in a flashback, he's all about how he doesn't have the right to take people's lives, only God does, I think. So it's
all
kind of
right, and this is a
thing.
big issue in the climax of the film, where what they do is basically entrapment as far as taking other people's lives.
Yeah, the ending is kind of really interesting, I think, and I'm looking forward to talking about it. But we'll continue on, right?
Yep, so Lee Van Cleef in his priest garb is like, I can take him out without using guns. Let's just go fast through this. He goes to Jack Palance's gangs where they're sleeping outside. He steals all their guns?
Yeah, he does. He is the stealthiest Metal Gear Solid motherfucking priest you've ever seen, right?
Yep.
Because first of all, Jack Palance and his pals have decided to camp in the middle of the road. Right? Mm-hmm. They're just lying in the road, sleeping there. He creeps up, knocks one guy out, but before he does that, he apologizes to God for even knocking him out, then steals all their guns.
Yep. Oh, yeah, he steals all their guns, and then he's like, but he doesn't want the whole gang. He just wants the guy who killed, I assume, the homeless man in the bar with a knife?
Yeah, and it's funny because Jack Palance, he's like, hey, your voice. Don't I know your voice? And I always wanted Lee Van Cleef. He goes, yes, it's me, Lee Van Cleef. You would know my voice. It's very well known.
Just like Jackie Chan.
You're really breaking the fourth wall here, Lee. Let's not do that.
If I were you.
Yeah, Jess, he's right. That man is right. Don't try it. Now that voice. That voice rings a bell. Is it possible that we have met before?
I don't believe we've had the pleasure. Let's go, young man. I don't want to miss my morning mass.
Well, Father, I'm afraid you're just gonna have to miss it.
Lord, it's a miracle!
So,
do you think Jack Palance and Lee Van Cleef were like, you know, they would meet and they're like sad because they used to both be in Hollywood and now they're like banished to Italy? What has become of our lives?
I mean, I guess a job's a job, right? I feel like both Lee Van Cleef and Jack Palance seem like the type of guys who just show up, do the work, and they're like, that's fine. You know, I'll get paid at the end of this.
Even though I should note that Jack Palance is very enthusiastic in this role. He is not sleepwalking through it.
Yeah, he isn't. And actually, I think Lee Van Cleef sells it as well.
Mm-hmm.
He does. He looks cool in it, which is all we really need from Lee Van Cleef.
Lee Van Cleef just needs to stand there to look cool.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, you know, good for him, right? He could be slouchy and not try.
All right, so after that, Lee Van Cleef brings the guy back to jail, and then...
Yeah, and then the baddies basically come back to town as expected, and sort of from miles away, they kill the priest.
Yeah.
Right?
They like, the priest doesn't even know what hit him. They just, like, point their guns and shoot him, and he's like, no! And at this point, I was like, oh, I guess so Lee Van Cleef only had to work for a few days?
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, no, this is one of those films where the big star shows up for a couple of days, gets killed, and then I was like, oh, here's what I definitely assumed was going to happen at this point. I assumed we were going to cut to Johnny's sad face, and then we were going to see him transform into an older man.
Into Lee Van Cleef?
No, like, just like an older guy, right?
Okay, yeah.
And then he would be the one getting the revenge.
Wait, how old would Jack Palance be at this point if you saw the 12-year-old kid turn into like a 20-year-old? He'd be on like death's door.
That's true. Well, there was two options here, right? One, well, I thought there was two options.
I was 100% certain that Johnny was going to be gunned down, and that's what would force Lee Van Cleef to grab his guns again and go on a murder spree for God.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been good, because Johnny is, I mean, though the Johnny is not, I mean, he doesn't really, it's not that important in the movie when you get down to it. Although, actually, no, he is super important.
Yes.
Okay.
Not important, but super important.
The film is very confusing at certain points. But I thought there were two options, right? Either that Johnny was going to grow up and then get revenge on a deathbed-ridden Jack Palance.
Just shoots him in his bed.
Yeah, just shoots him in his bed. Or the other option was, he'd be like, oh, now that Lee Van Cleef, the priest, is dead, I guess I must become a priest. And then the rest of the movie would just about be him being a priest.
How is that one of the options? there's none. How amazing would the film have been if Johnny, the kid actor, becomes the gunman and is like shooting everybody down in the climax and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, it would have been good. I mean, except people don't really get shot down in the climax. It's one of the weirdest things.
No, they don't. Well, they kind of do, but in the most there's some deaths in the climax that happen. I love how we keep like making people wait to talk about stuff later on. But there's some deaths in the climax where in normal movies you would be like, woo! In this one you're like, ugh, that's really mean.
Well, actually, I was just kind of like, wait, what happened most of the time? So Johnny is so horrified by seeing the priests get killed. He becomes mute, which is a part that I didn't really get for scenes till scenes later. I mean, why did that
didn't
happen?
understand either until later on. Someone's like, oh, are you mute because you witnessed something horrible? And he's like, yep. I'm like,
yeah,
okay.
because apparently that happened a lot, I guess, in the Old West. But Johnny escapes. He steals 2 horses. He does a trick that he thinks is clever, where he sends one off in one direction and then hides for a while. But then the baddies kind of are like, oh, that's obviously a trick. We're not fucking morons. And then one of them chases him up a bell tower, the one who looks the most like Frank Zappa. And he throws something at Frank Zappa, and then Frank Zappa sort of falls out the bell tower and we assume dies. Then he ends up in Mexico, right? Because he basically heard that this guy's brother was in Mexico, so he just like goes to Mexico.
He just like ran to Mexico because he lost his horse.
Yeah, he runs to Mexico, and then he just starts going up to random people, which leads to the funniest sequence, I think, when he goes up to an incredibly stereotypical Mexican with like a big fat sombrero and all that, and he starts to write in the sand because he can't talk, and the guy's like, I can't read, senor. And I was like, amazing. Love it.
Did Michael Bay direct this?
Yeah, pretty much. And then another random Mexican guy starts beating shit out of him for no clear reason. And then just literally seconds later, he just finds Lee Van Cleef's brother.
Yeah,
who
someone
is...
just says his name. They're like, oh, you know, Louie's over the other ridge. And he's like, Louie? That's Lee Van Cleef's brother.
He runs across, he meets Lee Van Cleef's daughter, who is not really that important to the film.
Nope. Let us never speak of her again.
Yeah, and Lee Van Cleef is there, and then there's probably Leif Garrett's big acting moment, where he has to basically explain that he saw Lee Van Cleef's brother get killed just by making facial movements.
Wait, don't you mean he draws it on a piece of paper and then
shows...
Well,
before he draws it on the piece of paper, though, they keep asking him questions, and the weird thing is that... he never just nods his head or shakes his head no. He always like makes a sort of a mixed signal where he's like yes and no with his sort of face, which I would find incredibly confusing. And it is confusing. But somehow Lee Van Cleef totally understands what's going on. And then they draw the picture and basically he's like, well, I gotta go back to this town and...
kill everyone, right? Kill him with his guns because he's the best shot in the West? Nope.
That's pretty much kind of sort of, but that's what at this point that's what you assume is going to happen, right? And he kind of implies that's what he's going to get down to.
Because he's God's gun. That's what the movie's called.
So we get a flashback with Lee Van Cleef, where he sort of remembers him and his brother. Basically, his brother being like, "You got to stop killing folk," because Lee Van Cleef gets cheated with gambling. It's confusing because there's 2 Lee Van Cleefs, right?
Yeah.
But we're just
Who cares? It doesn't matter. All that matters is that Lee Van Cleef starts heading towards the town, and at that point, it's a canon film.
Yes, it's true. It's a canon film, so what's important is that the baddies start to sexually assault women for a really long time.
I think it's probably the most violent sexual assault, and the biggest one, in any canon film we've watched up to date. Because the baddies are really...
you're forgetting...
Oh, which one am I forgetting?
You're forgetting The Wicked Die Slow, our other Western.
Wait, is there like a mass sexual assault in that movie?
Well, okay, I mean, if you're thinking in terms of number of people being sexually assaulted in a single scene,
that's what I'm
then
thinking.
Yes. But if you're thinking in terms of the most violent and horrifying ones, Wicked Die Slow definitely.
Yeah, Wicked Die Slow. But in this one, it's like a bar full of women, and all the bad guys try to sexually assault them, and the women fight back viciously.
Yeah, there's like so yes, it's kind of like you know when you feel like there's a lot of murders in this film, it's like which is worse? Is it like a scene where a bad guy kills 12 people in one go, or a scene where he murders one person very violently, right? Because this is like 12 sexual assaults happening in one frame, basically.
Is it played for comedy? Because it doesn't feel like it. Because they're like, spread your legs, spread your legs.
I think it's something we've talked about before, but it's definitely played to titillate. Do you know what I mean? As always, because you're seeing lots of like legs and panties and stuff. I think you're supposed to be kind of enjoying it, which is why where the scene goes, it gets very confusing. Because Jack Palance shows up.
Yeah, laughing.
He's like, lol, this is hilarious. I'm having a great time. But then Sybil Danning is like, no, you shouldn't be having a good time because Johnny is your son.
Because all of the sexual assault reminds me that you're a father.
Yeah, and he was like, what? That has to be a lie. Everyone stop the sexual assault.
They all stop on a dime. It's like if there was a record scratch. Like,
goddamn crazy.
Yes, a record scratch to stop sexual assaults. And then
I'm terrified that at some point people will listen to all our podcasts and our discussions about sexual assault and edit them into like one big podcast or book being like the uninformed opinions of men concerning cinematic assault.
Well, we're always against them.
We are always against it.
I mean, it's not. But the thing is, and this scene gets weird because basically he walks over at Sybil Danning, and she's like, "Don't you remember in such and such a place?" And he's like, And then so here's what I assumed incorrectly, that somehow that they would have had a romance in the past before he became a baddie, right?
Nope. He sexually assaulted Sybil Danning.
Yes, when he was a soldier in the actually, I'm not sure which army he was in. I thought he was wearing blue, actually, right? So he was actually fighting for the North.
Yeah, that's right.
I think.
Yeah, North.
So, yeah, so he basically assaults her in the barn or something. Mm-hmm. There's kind of a gross scene of a young man's arse. Her boobs fall out. It's not, it's sort of to titillate, but it's also sort of weird because they play like this song, right? I forget what it's called. It's called, Johnny Come Marching Home Again. Like it's like a
hum it for me, Matthew. Then I'll know what it is.
I think it's one of those songs from that era. What's that word? Oh my god, the uninformed opinions of fucking everything. The Civil War, the American Civil War, that's what it's called, right? It's like one of those torch songs from the time about how sad it was for when the soldiers when they came back, and I actually think it's maybe about soldiers from the South.
Johnny came marching home. Like
but
that?
It's confusing, and the thing is, Jack Palance is like...
He's like, overjoyed that he has a son.
Yeah, he's like, oh yeah, that time that I basically raped you and had a son from that. That's brilliant. He's so happy about it. He's like slapping guys on the back.
If he had cigars, he would have taken them out, yeah.
He's like so happy that he has a son. You're very confused. And then it's like, da-da-da. Lee Van Cleef was watching from a window.
So, my question when you see Lee Van Cleef watching through a window is, was he there the entire time? Was he getting his jollies off of what was happening?
No. Lee Van Cleef is a family man now. He would not enjoy that. He basically just showed up in time to hear the confession, right?
That is some shitty timing on Lee Van Cleef's part.
It's true, but I mean, Jack Palance had stopped the sexual assaults, right? So Lee Van Cleef, like, his hands are clean in this situation, maybe. I'm not sure. But the point is at this point, I was like, which way is this going to go, right? Because now Lee Van Cleef has information about Johnny that's important, right?
Is it important? Who cares? Just kill Jack Palance. Johnny will never know he was his father. What difference does it make?
Yeah, I mean, basically, he sees Johnny, he gives Johnny a hug for some reason, and then we enter what I consider to be the spooky ghost trick segment of the movie.
So I should clarify that this director loves having these kind of tricks in his movies. In Sabata and the Sartana films, this was a staple of the old, like, bad guys come crashing in and they shoot who they think is the guy. Oh no, it's just a dummy. Like, that is the director's signature.
Yeah, Lee Van Cleef's whole plan is to dress up as his brother and basically cause tricks where the baddies will end up, I don't know, committing suicide or dying of fright or something, because he said he doesn't want to shoot people anymore.
He doesn't like knock them out and make sure the law gets them or anything. At one point, he knocks a guy out, sets him up dressed as Lee Van Cleef, so the other bad guys will shoot him and kill their baddie friend.
Yeah, and then when they see him show up also as a priest version of Lee Van Cleef, they freak out and then one stabs another one? And
like he just turns into a knife or something like that? That's what it looked like.
Yeah, it's quite confusing. But then Johnny kind of ruins it a bit by starting to fire a gun at someone. He's like, no, Johnny, I said I didn't need you to fire the gun. He sort of tells Johnny off a bit. You think that would be important? Not really important.
Do you think Lee Van Cleef just has a massive ego?
What do you think you're
like
doing?
He's like, I've shot a whole bunch of people with guns. It's kind of boring. I want to play a game. I want to kill them in a different way, kill them in a funnier way that will be a better story.
Well, the thing is, for the audience, this is not better, right? This is much more confusing and more boring. In fact, probably the best part of this happens is that, so Jack Palance, Sybil Danning, and Johnny, they escape for some reason, sort of together. I'm not really, or like.
Oh, it's because Jack Palance says, "Come out, Johnny, or I'll kill your mom."
Yeah, so he forces them to run away with him.
Yeah.
And then there's a few baddies left, still trying to shoot Lee Van Cleef, and Lee Van Cleef does this cool dude thing where as they're firing him, he's literally just walking towards them, and his solution is to have a random prostitute shoot another guy in the back of the head, which is kind of awesome because she's like, well, girls, I guess it's over. And I was like, I don't really know what the point of that was, but you know, sisters doing it for themselves.
Yeah, that's nice, but that just makes Lee Van Cleef look like either a coward or an idiot. He's like, I'd rather other people do my business. He has a smoke machine of some kind.
Yeah, he does have a smoke machine at one point.
And like you said, I don't know what his plan is. Is it to scare the guys to death? Like, what does he think is gonna happen? Is it just like going mute, like dying of fright happened a lot in the Old West?
I guess, yeah, I mean, that probably was his plan. He was like, well, if seeing something horrible made Johnny go mute, I mean, these hard, tough guys, I mean, I'm sure they would just die of fright if they saw a ghost. You know, it's like...
People were not healthy back in the Old West.
His problem is that when Scooby-Doo in the Old West shows up, right, and they're like, oh, it was you all along, Lee Van Cleef!
And like, when he walks toward Jack Palance...
So, we get to the climax, basically. The climax says that Jack Palance has lost...
Use that word very loosely.
Yeah, loosely. Basically, Jack Palance has lost his bananas. He's just mental now. He's so happy as a son. He sort of tells this really boring story about how, well, I didn't keep doing those crimes, but my nephews kept making me do them. I've always wanted to move to, Mexico.
Has he gone mental, or has he had a change of heart?
Because he stopped talking about, he's an old man now, he's found himself all alone. But then at one point, Sybil Danning tries to cut him off, and he's like, you shut up.
Okay. Just to make sure to know that he's still a bad guy.
Yeah, and basically the idea is he has $50,000 hidden away in the graveyard, and he's going to use it to, I don't know, have their good life with Johnny and his mother. Maybe the mother's coming, I'm not really clear, in Mexico. But Lee Van Cleef shows up.
He's gonna kill him, right, Matthew? I'm really excited for Lee Van Cleef to finally kill the dude.
Well, what he does instead is shoot Jack Palance's gun out of his hand and then shoot it in the air a bunch of times.
Why? Why did he have to do that?
Because he's so good with guns that then he doesn't want to kill people. And then Jack Palance is like, you can have all the money, and just starts throwing money at him. At which point, if I was fucking Lee Van Cleef, I'm like, look, if I'm having the money, I want it in the fucking bag. I don't want it strewn across a fucking graveyard, you tool. But then he goes into the bag, and this is the part which I wasn't really clear. So Johnny knows there's a small gun in one of the bags, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when he goes to put his hand in the other bag, Johnny goes like, no, but Lee Van Cleef is already on top of it. So he just immediately shoots Jack Palance, kind of spoiling the whole thing for him, because he did end up killing a guy with a gun. But then when Jack Palance pulls his hand out, he's just holding the money, right?
Yeah.
And it's just flying away out of his hand. So I think the idea was that, like, Jack Palance wasn't going to shoot him in the end? Or was it? I'm not really sure.
I don't know. Jack Palance is a bad guy. Even though No, we skipped the part that made Jack Palance an even badder guy, where he shoots a bunch of his own men.
Oh yeah, we did totally miss that, but it wasn't that important. He kills Frank Zappa, who fell off the bell tower.
And was now paralyzed from the waist down.
It's just proof that, it was just one of those sequences where it's like, this guy will do anything, and it's not really that important. I mean, most of these scenes aren't important. I mean, we have all these weird twists, like, John is your son, and Lee Van Cleef has a brother, and John.
But it doesn't mean anything. I think that what the ending is trying to say is it's all about, when you're pardoned by the church. Maybe that's all that Jack Palance wanted.
Maybe, because the very final frame, right, is that for some reason the puppet guys have gone to Mexico as well, and when not Jack Palance, I keep confusing him, when Lee Van Cleef goes to ride away, he rides away within the frame of the puppet show, right?
Because he's just a puppet of God, that's all it is.
I thought it was more like, kind of saying, like, who gives a shit? It's just like you just watched a couple of puppets pounding each other for an hour and a half, so it's not real anyway. Do you know what I mean? It's one of those meta commentary things where they...
Or, you know what? Maybe we're giving it way too much...
credence or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, you're giving something way too much credence in the fact that it was probably just a cool shot, and that's why the director got it.
Oh, I mean, definitely. I mean,
this film is filled with those cool shots. The final duel, every shot starts on a canted angle and then goes straight again, like it's something out of The Quick and the Dead.
This is a weird one because I did enjoy it while I was watching it. It was very breezy, it's fast, enough stuff happens.
I've liked it less as we've talked about it.
Yeah, me too. That's the weird thing, is that when I watched it, I was like, you know what, I'm enjoying this. Because it's almost like if I'm not actually looking at Lee Van Cleef, he doesn't seem cool anymore.
Just talking. So what you're trying to say is that cool is something that you can't just describe or try to capture. That if it's not in front of you, it's not cool.
Yes, and maybe that's the true message of this movie.
Deep, man.
I don't think so.
Deep.
So the question is, though, as we always ask, does this go into the canon?
This is a tough one. Because it is the first Golan and Globus film that we've been able to watch. But it wasn't that good, and it wasn't that bad either. So it's that weird middle ground.
It is a weird middle ground, where I would say that this is one of those ones where we should put it in, but if we were able to see those earlier Golan and Globus pictures, maybe we would remove it. Because it's the first one we've been able to get, and it's probably the first one that anyone can get.
You know what?
Right?
I'm going to say, yeah, I know, but I almost want to say no and put another more important Golan and Globus one.
Okay, well, I can accept that. I don't think we should put it in then. Nope,
it's not getting in. Maybe the next Western we'll watch, because there is one more Western that's also Golan and Globus produced. It'll be great.
So, at the beginning of the podcast, though, Justin, you said you hate it when people say they like the movie, and then because why would you listen to the rest? What's funny is, we were like, we like this, and then we end up being like, yeah, but it's not going to the canon, and maybe we didn't really like it as much as we thought.
So what you're trying to say is that people who watch the movie and were like, that wasn't so good, and then they come listen to the podcast, hear us say you know what, it wasn't that good.
Well, no, it's because the movie was so full of meaningless twists that we had to have one of our own.
Dun-dun-dun. So what are you going to recommend this week, Matthew?
So I was thinking about it. So here's the funny thing, though.
Oh wait, let me recommend my movie first, because I know you haven't seen it, and we can discuss yours. So I'm going to recommend, I was thinking of spaghetti westerns that I could recommend. Maybe a Sabata movie, Sartana, or the Burt Reynolds starring Navajo Joe, which is great. You should see it. Directed by Sergio Corbucci, the guy who did Django. But I'm going to recommend an American western, directed by Clint Eastwood, starring Clint Eastwood, called High Plains Drifter. Now, for people that don't know, Clint Eastwood, when he started directing, directed a lot of westerns, seemingly because that's what he knew. And High Plains Drifter is a weird one where the man is like Clint Eastwood himself. It's like the man with no name. He's cool. He wears a awesome outfit. He doesn't have a name. He's just known as the Stranger. But the twist in this movie, which is Clint Eastwood goes to a village and has to protect them, is that Clint Eastwood is basically the devil. He is like a supernatural entity in the context of the film. And that's as much as I can say about it. I definitely recommend you to go see it. It's called High Plains Drifter. It's not a feel-good movie, definitely.
That sounds great.
Yeah, it's confusing because Clint Eastwood made 2 films that he directed where he played a ghostly gunfighter. High Plains Drifter is the better of the two, in my opinion. It came out in the mid-'70s. He made one in the '80s called Pale Rider, which he's also a ghost-like character. But check out High Plains Drifter.
I do like Clint Eastwood's westerns. I think Unforgiven is sort of a famously famous one, basically, a famously famous one. But that movie is super great, totally worth seeing.
Unforgiven? Oh yeah, it's fantastic. Well, I mean, High Plains Drifter, the funny thing is that on the surface, it looks like it's just another take on The Man with No Name. But when you find out that Clint Eastwood doesn't want to save these villagers, he just wants to fuck them over, that's when things get really interesting. So I would definitely recommend
that. That sounds great. So, the movie I'm going to recommend it after this, my preamble. My preamble being that I watched 2 westerns this week, and I liked God's Gun the most. The other western I watched, can you guess what it was?
Bone Tomahawk. No, Hateful Eight.
Hateful Eight. Which
what? You like God's Gun more than the Hateful Eight?
Yes.
You're crazy. You're crazy.
I'm crazy. No, actually, here's what I'll say. While watching God's Gun, I was enjoying it more than I enjoyed Hateful Eight while watching it. Do you know what I mean? I think Hateful Eight is better, but I was still not very much of a fan of it. We don't need to go into why I didn't really like it, but it's a snowy western, and so I was obviously thinking about probably the most famous snowy western.
Definitely the most famous snowy western.
The Great Silence, which is an interesting movie to talk about, I think. Because...
Okay, do you want to get into spoiler territory, or...?
Okay, so, kind of like you talked about High Plains Drifter, this Great Silence is not supposed to be a feel-good movie. Right?
No, it is not a feel... Yeah, let's talk it just in that context. That is not a feel-good movie.
It's not a feel-good movie, but it has this silent assassin. He went mute because he saw Lee Van Cleef die. Not true. A silent kind of guy who goes around killing bounty hunters, and the enemy bounty hunter is played by Klaus Kinski.
Ooh, the great Klaus Kinski.
Well, we can't really call him great because of all the disturbing things about his actual real life. But
he's a great actor. He's a great actor, even though he was a piece of shit in real life.
Yeah, it's true. He is good in this. He's been in a lot of tripe, but he's good in this. He's wonderfully disturbing and creepy and bad. And it's just a beautiful, snowy film that spends a lot of time in the grim
watching
snow.
People go through the snow. There's a lot of that.
Yeah, and it's great. But the thing with this movie is that it gets to a climax, like the feel bad climax, which is just for me. So
I showed this movie to Matthew and a bunch of people, and the wind that went out of the room when that climax happened.
Because I feel like it kind of comes out of. It feels like it comes out of nowhere. Do you know what I mean? Where it's just well, this is what happens now. And you're kind of but why is that what's had to happen? And I know that's kind of the point, which is the good guys don't always win in that, but it just feels so crushingly unpleasant after all that build-up that you don't really like it, and I get why it's that way, but it sort of ruins the movie for me, which is why what I'm recommending you do is...
Which I did to Matthew, as if he had heard a scary story that he did not like, and then I retold the story with a happy ending.
So here's what you do. But I'm not recommending people retell the story. I'm recommending you get to a point, and you will know this point when you watch the movie, where the Great Silence comes to the front of a bar, right? And it's towards the end, and you feel like it can go 2 ways, right? When he comes to the front of the bar, stop the film and search on YouTube for the Great Silence happy ending, and watch that version and just pretend the real ending never happened. Because although the real ending, the happy ending was made for, I think it was made for Asia and Africa.
Yeah, it was.
And therefore is kind of just as nonsensical as the real ending,
the happy ending is insane. It's like a fuck you ending.
But it's so funny. It's so funny and so fun that I kind of loved it. And it just leaves you with a smile on your face, which is the complete opposite of what that film is supposed to do. But I love it.
That's sacrilege. You said that on a thread on Facebook. People were talking about the movies, and they're like, "You're insane! That's what the whole movie is."
But I think I honestly think that stupid ending is better than the real ending, because both endings kind of just come out of nowhere. And so you might as well get the happy one if it's just going to be meaningless anyway.
So what you're trying to say is that you need to lie to yourself about how harsh life is.
No, that is not what I'm saying, Justin. Great Silence is one of those movies that feels like, like a sort of a revenge picture where you're going to get payoff. Do you know what I mean? And it doesn't, and it's part of the point that they don't want to give you that payoff. But if I was watching a depressing movie, do you know what I mean? Like,
you'd expect a depressing ending, but because you're not watching a depressing movie, it pulls the rug out from under you.
Yeah, you want the context to be leading you somewhere. I think that's maybe not.
So you're not someone who's writing reviews that are like, why should I care about Captain America 3? I know Captain America's not going to die.
No, I don't feel that way. I mean, like, I love that feeling of peril, even if it's not like, a true peril.
So you love the feeling of peril, but you don't like the consequences of that peril turning out negative.
Yeah, that's true. That's why I'm very, very careful when I autoerotic asphyxiate myself. I make sure there's always a spotter. There's always got to be someone there. I'm not going to go down like that fucking guy from NXS.
Or Eric Roberts. Yeah. No, Eric Roberts is still alive. David Carradine.
Yeah, it's true. Eric Roberts is my spotter. He wasn't there for David Carradine, but he's there for me.
Eric Roberts is in everything, including the videos of Matthew Otto asphyxiating himself.
Yeah, it's funny because he also plays the cat in those autoerotic asphyxiation movies.
He plays AC, your accidental cat. Is he as bored as he sounds like the other times he played the cat?
No, he loves autoerotic asphyxiation, so he's real excited.
Is that why your cat is named AC? It's autoerotic asphyxiation cat?
Yes, because I can't spell asphyxiation, I spell it with a C. Okay, we got silly, so I think we should wrap this up.
Okay, my name's Justin McClue.
I was Matthew Kumar.
Thanks for listening.
Night, everybody!